Well, good morning again. Once again, this is Alan Schell, Account Manager with ABC Computers, and welcome to this week's broadcast. For many companies out there, the single largest investment you have is in your inventory, and today's presentation is all about how you can optimize that investment using Lanham's advanced forecasting and procurement process. We're joined today by Andrew Bing, who is probably a familiar voice to many of you. Andrew has been in this industry since, I believe, about 1996, working for Lanham as a consultant. He currently travels the globe talking to people about supply chain planning and execution. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you.
We're going to save questions for the end. If you do have a question as we go, you can either just raise your hand and I'll make sure to call on you at the end, or you can go ahead and type it in, and we'll save questions for the end. And once again, Andrew, welcome, and take it away.
Thank you. Good. One of them is provide understanding of what.
Andrew, I'm sorry, we're having a bit of difficulty hearing you.
I'm on the cell phone, unfortunately.
Well, that was a little clearer.
Okay. So if you have any other problems, just let me know. So I'm in Santa Barbara, California, in the hills a little bit, so sometimes the cell coverage comes in and out. So as I mentioned, advanced forecasting is a lot like driving a car down the road. Yesterday I was with an acquaintance who just took delivery of a brand new car, and it has all of the computer gadgets, so it really takes a lot to understand what's going on inside that vehicle, and the same thing relates to advanced forecasting. So what we're going to talk about first is what are some of the reasons that companies look at advanced forecasting and procurement. What are what we call the pain points? What is causing them to look? And it starts off with forecast accuracy, making sure that I have where can I pull information from. And then if I'm working with large customers, how do I do collaboration with them? And then we continue to go on down the list. It will depend upon how your business operates, what the business processes are, to which ones I get an area that we need to look at. Companies have the issue, what do I do with new items? How do I get a new item to work for me? And also, how do I work with those slow-moving items? Then for the environment, we're looking at how do we do branch replenishment? How do we pull those other pieces in? So the way we handle this is we do it as two pieces of a very big puzzle. The first piece of that puzzle is how do I create a forecast? What do I do to do that? So the way we do this is we work with the historical data. So we work with the data of what you have sold previously from a location. For those of you that are currently on NAV and have been on NAV for over a year or two, those of you that might be just joining the NAV on board, we can create this, we bring in positive information, just build in and bring in historical data. Now,
Hey, Andrew, this is Alan again. We're only catching about every other word. Would it be possible for you to dial in on a landline, or do you have any other options besides the cell?
I have a landline right behind me, so let me just dial in and see if I can get that for you.
That'd be fantastic. Sorry about this, but it'll just take him a minute to dial in and rejoin us.
Okay, I just.
Yeah, it figures, Andrew. I mean, when you and I talked before the meeting, you had the best cell coverage that I could. The conversation was strong. It's figures that just as we start the presentation, we'll have problems, huh?
Yeah. So I'm just looking up the phone number. So hang on one second.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hanging up the cell phone. So how is this?
So far, so good.
Hello?
Yep, I can hear. Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Okay. Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, fantastic. Let's give it another try.
Okay. So let's give it another try. So as I mentioned, using the forecasting starts off with the historical data. We can bring this over if you've been using NAV for quite a while, or if you're just coming new to NAV, we can bring this data across by just 5 fields of information. And as with every sale that happens, there are some times where I don't want this sale to become part of my history. And if that's the case, we give the ability of adjusting this usage. That adjustment can be done during the sales order entry process. An example is selling a closeout or selling a markdown that I don't want to become part of my normal historical data. Or it can be done after the fact. So it can be done when I'm doing my analysis and my review, and I notice that, oh, this usage is abnormal, and I need to adjust it. There's also the ability of doing what we call redirective usage. This is where one item might be, for example, being replaced by another item, and I want to move all of the historical data from that one item. Or it may be that this customer has been serviced out of location A, and now I'm going to service this customer out of location B, and I'd like to move all of their history to that other location. These are just a couple of examples of the many different ways you can do what we refer to as redirective usage. That's moving the history. Also, when I talked earlier about doing new items, we also have a function and feature called cloning of usage. This is where we can take the historical data from one item that we're still going to sell, copy that data to make history for a new item. And when we copy that data, we can indicate what percentage of that history we want to go. So if you think that this item is only going to sell 75% as well as the old item, you can copy over 75% of the history. Excuse me. All of this comes into creating the historical data and getting the data ready for the formula selection. So our next step in the process is to actually choose which formula we want to work against this data for creation of the forecast. And we do this by coming up with the best fit formula. So for every location that sells the product, we will test, at least on the first of the month, a group of 18 different formulas against that data. So for example, coming up here in a couple of weeks on the 1st of August, we'll take the first item at the first location and say, Formula A, what would you have predicted for July, and compare that to what actually happened in July. We then see an error percentage. How much was that forecast off? And we'll store that error percentage. We'll then do that exact same process again for the month of June and see the error percentage, for the month of May and see the error percentage, and for the month of April and see the error percentage. So we do it for the 4 months back. And by the way, that is a parameter that you can set up in the system, so you can change that if you want to. We store all 4 of those results, and then we rank them with the lowest formula error percentage on the top, and that then becomes the formula that we use to go forward for that particular item. Now, we do this, as I mentioned, at least on the 1st of every month, but we'll also do it periodically during the month if any of the data that supports the formula selection gets changed. So if you redirect usage from one item to another, we would then flag that item that we need to reforecast that item. As I said, we do this for the item at every location that it's sold from. If we also set in what we call the replenishment path, in other words, where does this item come from, that it comes from another location, we'll move that data both from the location that receives the product so that we forecast how much to transfer to that location, and also to the location that actually supplies it so we know how much product that location needs and can forecast all of this information. So this is then the beginning of the forecast. And the reason I say the beginning is we give a lot of tools and functionality to adjust that forecast, make changes, give it information, because quite often there may be information that you have that the computer doesn't have. So we'll do the forecast based upon the computer data, but you may know something different. So we give you the ability of making adjustments to that forecast. Those adjustments, excuse me, can be done at the individual item level at the individual location, or they also can be done via a report so that I do a whole group of items at the same time. That's just the first type of adjustment that we can do. We We also give the ability of doing what is called a forecast summary. And this is where we can summarize a group of items together into a total of a summary. An example, for those of you using NAV now, it might be your item category code, or it might be your inventory posting group, or it might be your location. And we can give you a summary at that level in either quantity or cost dollars or selling dollars, and also give you the ability of making an adjustment at that summary level and let it flow down in whatever percentage each one of those items are of that summary total. So that's another way that we can adjust the forecast. Then, as I mentioned earlier during the beginning of the PowerPoint, if you're working with your large customers, we may do collaborative forecasting. And in this case, on the screen, you see that the arrow goes in both directions. Because when you do collaborative forecasting, you may want to pull out the historical data for that customer. So if you're doing what we call a total collaborative forecast, meaning that the customer is telling you what they're going to buy in total, you want the ability of pulling out their history so that I don't have their history in there for the calculated forecast as well as the collaborative forecast. In doing the collaborative forecasting, it can come in a number of different ways. The example that we see here in our PowerPoint is that we're actually going to pull that customer's data, just segregate out their specific data of those specific items, test those same formulas that we did for the total forecast, but now do it just on this customer, create a collaborative forecast, which we can push to Excel. That forecast can then go to either the customer directly, or it can go to the sales representative to have discussions with the customer, and then any changes made to that collaborative forecast can then be brought back into the system. This works really well if you're dealing with big box retailers, if you're dealing with Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's, anybody of those nature, so that you can collaborate with them and really get on top of what is going on and work with them. Final step that we have in the forecast side is also sales promotions. And again, this has an arrow going both to the forecast and back to the historical data, because a sales promotion by our definition in AFP is an extraordinary amount of product that you're going to sell, meaning something that is not normal. So you put an item on promotion, you then indicate what quantity you expect to sell above and beyond the norm. Since you've put that item on special or done something to do it as a promotion, you normally will figure that either a portion of that usage or all of that usage would not reoccur. So we need to have the ability of making an adjustment then to the historical data so that we don't forecast based upon that data. So we give that functionality directly right in the promotional forecast screen. So all of this together is the building block of how we create the forecast, what information we pull together so that we have a forecast and we can now go forward to the second piece of the puzzle. Excuse me, was just taking a sip of water. So the second piece of the puzzle is now that we have the forecast, let's go ahead and let's make sure that we have the proper product available to do and to use. So the first step in this is, how does the product get here? So for each and every location that we service with advanced forecasting and procurement, we create something in the system called a procurement unit card. This is a card that we use to set all the parameters of how we handle this item for this location. And in there, the first thing we have to set is, how does the item get to this location? And it can get to this location by one of four methods. It can be an item that we buy. That's your distribution. So you buy it from a vendor, either domestic or foreign. You could put it together by kits or assemblies. And for those of you on NAV before 2013, it would be called kits. For those of you that are on NAV 2013, it's called assemblies. So we can put the product together by doing what we call light manufacturing. You can also put it together by doing full production and running production bombs and routings. Or you could say, I get the item from another location so that my source is another location. So we specify this on the procurement unit card, and now we're ready to push the forecast out. If the forecast is going to an item where we produce it or we assemble it, what we do is we create time phase expected inventory for each item. We look out to a date, and the sample that you see here on the screen is looking down in 7-day increments. Now, this again is a setup parameter, so we could set it differently if we need to. So we look out every 7 days and look at the time phase expected inventory and say, do I need to make product, whether it be through production or it be through a kit or assembly. We look to see that information. In this sample on the screen, January 1st, we don't need to do any. January 8th, we don't need to do any, but January 15th, we do. The sample also shows if it were a production item, in the case that I want to pull 2 weeks' worth of demand into a single production order. If it were a kit or assembly, we would simply do each week separately. And what we do is we run through the normal nav functionality to create either a theoretical kit or to create a simulated production order. So now we know what are the components that are needed in order to build this item and to have this item available for us. So once we've done that process, we then can go to the next step. The next step is then pushing either the kit and assembly component requirements or the purchase requirements into what we call a suggested order. A suggested order is a theoretical purchase order using a whole group of parameters. These are created with one suggested order per location per vendor. So if I buy from vendor A into location 1 and 2, I would have 2 suggested orders. So we look at every item that comes to that location from that vendor and look out and look through the expected inventory through what we call lead time horizon date. Now, I'll explain lead time horizon in just a moment, and that'll show you exactly how we calculate that value. And if we see that we have a need that is not available, we'll then show that line on the suggested order for that particular item at that location. At the same time, we also look at the lead time of each individual item. We can look at each individual item's lead time, or we can look at the lead time for the vendor. If you're buying from overseas and bringing product in by container, you most likely will want to set what we call a frozen lead time, meaning set the same lead time for all items so that the vendor delivers that container in full. You can do it that way, or you can let the system do calculated lead times for you. We also, at the same time on that suggested order, look and see, have we hit the vendor target? Is there a minimum for this overall order that we need to hit? Is there some requirements that we have in order to hit these overall requirements? Now, this could be that I need to fill a container, and what do I need to do to, let's say, fill a 40-foot container? Is it 40,000 pounds? Is it X number of cubic feet? Have I hit this target? If I haven't hit the target, I then need to be able to have functionality so I can achieve that target. The way we do this is we do something called push vendor lead time. This says, let's recalculate this suggested order by adding a certain number of days to our calculation so that we relook at not just the items that have already shown up on this suggested order, but we relook at every item that we buy from this vendor to say, now if I've added this extra amount of days to it, what is my requirement? What are my total needs? And this way we can meet those requirements of maybe a dollar amount or a container level or whatever it might be. In conjunction at the same time, we also look to see if I'm in a multi-location environment, does any of my other locations also have this product on hand? And if it does, has this other location gone through the calculation and seen that surplus inventory exists at that location? So we have set up parameters that are on the location card that allow you to set up at what point do I consider my inventory to be surplus. This is normally by looking at the lead time horizon and adding an extra number of days to it, or what we call a pad. So we'll see that surplus inventory exists. We'll then give the buyer, the purchasing person, the ability that if they want to, they could say, wait, instead of buying this product, help me balance my inventory. And this is where I can save my money, build my hidden costs, bring that inventory down by doing this surplus inventory and creating a transfer order. So instead of buying the product, I'll then transfer the product from another location. As a company, you can set up whatever business rules you want, whatever processes you want to control this, to say which locations you might transfer from. We have one client of ours up in Canada that has 27 locations spread out across Canada. And what they've done is given authority to their buyers to only transfer if the location is within 500 miles of another location. That's the rules that they've put in place. So everybody can put their different rules into place. The last step that we come along is actual creation of the purchase order. This is from the suggested order, a one-button push that will then turn around and create the actual purchase order document. Now, in order to do all of this, we use what we call mainly for the items lead time horizon. This is looking out to a date in the future, and here on the screen you see a sample of how you might calculate that date in the future. This is looking at an item that might have a 60-day lead time. Then the review cycle days is how many days in between purchase orders. So do I normally buy from this vendor once a week? And then how much safety stock, how much additional stock do I want to have on hand in number of days, excuse me, to handle the fluctuations in either my vendor's delivery time or the fluctuations in my forecast. So is my forecast going up or down? So all of this together comes up with the lead time horizon. This lead time horizon could be the same for every item that I buy from the vendor, or it could be different depending on how I'm doing lead time and how I'm doing safety stock. So I pull this together and I look at each item and say, through my lead time horizon date, if I've fallen below 0, then I need to buy product. And then I'll use all of the other parameters to determine what quantity to buy. So all of this comes together and creates the suggested order. For those of you that are working in what we call a multi-location environment, where you have more than one warehouse, you may be doing, excuse me, what some people call DRP, some people call hub and spoke, people call branch replenishment. But basically what it works out to looking like is either one of these two screenshots, where you might look at vendor 1 that it's supplying 2 locations. One location just stands by itself, or the location number 1 actually supplies other warehouses. So when we do the purchasing into warehouse 1, we need to look at not only what is the sales demand and forecast demand for what warehouse 1 sells on its own, but we also need to look at what are the forecasts and what are the requirements for the locations below that that are serviced. And in this example, warehouse 1 supplies warehouse 4, 5, and 6. And then warehouse 5 also supplies warehouse 9. Now this especially helps if I have an item that I call sporadic. This is an item that I don't sell a lot of at any location, but by rolling up the data and by pulling the data up to the top level, now I get a much better picture of the sales and the information, and I'm able to do a forecast at that top level. The one on the right, vendor number 2, is a much more simple process where I might be buying into one location and that supplies to other locations. So this is what we refer to as branch replenishment, hub and spoke, or distribution requirements planning. And it works really well for those of you that are doing more than one location. Finally, we look at the surplus and excess calculation. So what this does is it looks out at your lead time horizon and then says, beyond my lead time horizon, again by setup parameter, I want to add an additional, in this case, surplus add days or pad days, where I'm adding another, in this example, 30 days to my time frame, and saying everything beyond that 30-day environment, beyond my lead time horizon, that I might have in stock is considered surplus and or excess. And then what we do is we also give a setup parameter that says at what point do I want to calculate that I start to have excess. So we call this the good, the bad, and the ugly. So the good inventory is my lead time horizon plus my pad days. The bad inventory is my surplus, that above that date and before the excess date, and then the excess. We'll show you the surplus and excess in a number of different places. One will show it to you on the suggested order. So if you're buying this item for another location, we'll show you that surplus and excess exist in another location. And we also show it to you in a surplus and excess report. This information is calculated every night as part of our overnight process. So as my information changes on a daily basis, so will my surplus and excess report. The end of all of this process is what we call the suggested order. This is where you get to see exactly what the system is telling you to buy and have the ability of drilling down and seeing all of this information. At this point, I'm going to stop my PowerPoint and now take you actually into the product, because now I've shown you what's going on under the hood. So now let's start to drive the car. So this is NAV 2013 for those of you that are not familiar with 2013. And this is what we call the Roll Center. This is the Advanced Forecasting Roll Center. This Roll Center can be customized, and Alan can show you a lot more information about the Roll Center. So here we have what we call the Vendor Buying Calendar Stack. This, if I click it, shows me all of the suggested orders that I've got out here. And here I can see how many lines have not yet been reviewed. That means that it's telling me to buy product. Now, just before coming on with Alan, I went ahead and calculated this so I wouldn't have to take that moment to do that. So now I'm going to click on and click the Suggested Order button. And here in the Suggested Order, I get to see the system telling me that this is what quantity I need to purchase. So right here on this top line, it's telling me that I need to purchase a quantity of 20. I've got a minimum order quantity and a maximum order quantity. In the next line down, you'll notice that the minimum order quantity is 0, the maximum order quantity is 34, yet it's telling me to buy 80 units. So how the system does this is it looks at the minimum order quantity, says, well, if you have more product at another location, if I were to transfer that, I don't need to buy. However, if I elected not to transfer it, that would be the maximum quantity. But then, in turn, it went and it suggested a higher level quantity above and beyond that. So if I click the calculation lines right here, it tells me exactly what it's doing. So it's telling me right here that it's looking through the lead time horizon. By the way, this is our demo system, so it is in 2014. It's in the future. So here it's telling me my lead time horizon date is March 23rd, 2014. And through that time, my maximum surplus quantity that I need is 34. But it also calculated the economic order quantity. Economic order quantity is a variable that you can set and say, do I want to use it for this item? Do I not want to use it for this item? And it works based upon the cost of money and the cost of this particular item. Let me just stretch this out here so you can see the balance of this calculation. So here, this item is looking at an ordering cost. How much does it cost me to create a purchase order? What my average monthly forecast is? How much does it cost me to carry the inventory? In other words, what does it cost me to keep an item in stock? And the cost of that item. And the economic order quantity is suggesting that you purchase 80. So when we run the suggested order, we'll always put whichever is greater, either the actual demand and need or the economic order quantity. And so that's how it came up with that quantity of 80 units to buy. I also have the ability here of coming in and looking at the forecast view. So if I look here at the forecast, this is my forecast for the future of this item. Now down here at the bottom, I can see that this one shows a formula that is a seasonal formula, and this second 3 on the end of it indicates that it's a trend. And the trend that the system determined is that our sales are going down by 52.5% on this item. So that's how it calculated this line right here, which is the calculated forecast line. This line right here is the forecast adjustment line if you've made any forecast adjustments through the promotion forecast or through the forecast summary or directly here on the forecast screen. And then here is the customer collaborative forecast line. And here I can drill into this. And when I drill into it, I can see which customer it is. And this was customer number 10,000. And that entry was made here on the 16th of March of this year. And so I can see all of that information. These 3 lines, the forecast adjust, and the customer forecast, make up the total of my forecast for this item at this particular location. This line of the demand line and the consume line are my actual sales orders is the demand, and the consumed is what I've already shipped to my customers. So if these 2 numbers, and in this case they do, are greater than my forecast, because my forecast was 28, my already shipped is 84, so I've made an automatic adjustment to the forecast of another 56 units. So therefore, my total forecast is 84. Since I've already shipped it, I don't have any forecast left. We also have the ability in setup here of saying, well, wait a minute, today's only 17 days through the month or 18 days through the month, so I still have 12 days of the month to go, so I may need to proportion a portion of my normal forecast for those 12 days into this forecast screen. So this forecast screen gives us that information. If we happen to be in a what we call branch replenishment or location roll-up, we want to be able to see the other locations. So here we have what we call the location inventory roll-up screen. So in this case, location 1 is buying the product, but it's buying it for all of these other locations. So what we need to do is we need to pull in their forecast through our horizon date and make that determination. So here we see what is their rolled up forecast through that time frame, and then we have a whole group of other columns that give us additional information. But then over at the very far right here, we have a column called surplus, and this says at the end of this date time frame, what do I need? So here I can see that at my lower level locations, I have positive quantities, so I don't need to transfer product. But at my top level, I need to bring in 34.5 pieces to meet my requirement. So that's exactly how we came up with this calculation quantity of the 34. This quantity right here of the calculated quantity is based upon the EOQ. We also have, as part of the analysis and the ability of looking in here, the ability of getting back to the historical data and looking at the historical data so that we can make decisions. Are we agreeing with everything the system is doing? So here, these are my sales hits. How many times was the item sold in that previous period? And then this quantity is what is the quantity that was sold. Either one of these two I can drill into, and I can see that here are the sales. And in this case, I sold even quantities of 15 in each one of my sales. I also have the ability here, if I wanted to, of making adjustments to this history. So this is where I talked about earlier, the ability of coming in and making an adjustment after the fact, if that's what you need to do. So our buyers normally spend the majority of their time here in the suggested order, making whatever changes they need to do, doing whatever analysis they need to do. Do I need to go back and make a parameter setup? Do I need to do anything of that nature? All of that information that I might need to do is contained on the procurement unit card. So here is our procurement unit card. And here on the ordering tab, I also have the ability of setting up my order multiple and my order minimum. Excuse me. So in this case, I've set up an order multiple of 5 units, meaning that it comes in a box of 5. So if I were to look at my calculation lines, here in my calculation lines, I'll see that my economic order quantity is 111, but it's been increased to 115 because of that order multiple of 5 units. So what I'm doing is I'm always updating the information, always based upon what information is available, where do I pull this information from. So this is where we look at the information that's coming and get to see all of the information that comes together. Now, some of you may be running kits or may be running production. And in those cases, what we need to do is we need to take those items that are a kit item and then create the forecast of the kit we're going to sell and then explode out the components. So here you can see that this kit item has no forecast requirement. So there's no forecast to it. But if I come down here a little bit further, here I can see what components do I need in order to build that kit or assembly. So here I can see that I don't need any in my first period, I don't need any in my second period, but starting in my third period, I need 33 units in order to build those components, or excuse me, build those kits. So what I have here is I also have the ability of drilling into this. Excuse me. So if I click on it, I can actually come in here and see, oh, here's what quantity I have on kits, and then these are the kits that I'm going to make from that information so that I can then drill further on if I want to and go look at the forecast of the kit item to make sure that it's selling what I project and all of that information is together. So that's the way we do the kit item. We also can look at those items that might be a production item. So this one is a production kit, or excuse me, a production item. And so here I again get to see all of the information, and here are the assembly orders or production orders, and here I can see there's my quantity on production orders, and I can see my different types of production orders and which production item it might be. So I get to see all of this information that I'm looking for, all of that information. So this is one way that we can look at our data very easily and see the information on those that we're getting ready to buy, where we're getting ready to buy. But it may be that I don't have a vendor scheduled to buy for a week or 2 weeks out, depending on what my review cycle is. So I may need to have the ability of looking at which items do I have in problem now. So we also have something called the alert worksheet. This is where every night, as part of the overnight process, we calculate the alerts. We currently have in the system 5 different alerts, and I'll show you some of these in a moment, but let me just describe what they are. The first one is the expected stock out. I think I'm going to be out of stock of this item within my lead time horizon, and when is that going to happen? Then there's also the late purchase order, where a purchase order is coming in late. There's also a late production order, where the production order is coming in late. There's also the surplus with open purchase order. That's where I'm buying a product, and I already have surplus on hand. And then there's the auto forecast alert. That's where it's going to give me an indication that this item is selling quicker than I had expected. This first one that we see here on the screen is an expected stock out. Now, my work date down here is January 23rd, 2014. So what it did was it calculated, do I expect to be out of stock of this item today? No. Then I look at it 7 days later, do I expect to be out of stock? No. And in this case, when it went out those 7-day increments, it went out, excuse me, to February 12th and said, now on February 12th, I expect to be out of stock by 2 units. Then it looked at 7 days further out, and then it said on that the 19th, I'm going to be out by 8 units. Then it looked out 7 days later, and it said, wait a minute, now I'm going to be out that. Then at this time frame, and then this last one is at the end of the lead time horizon that we look at. If I possibly had an ending date here, that would mean that I'm actually coming back into stock on that date by a receipt of an item. We also have the ability, since these alerts are calculated every night, of doing what we call snoozing the alert. This is meaning that I've done everything that I can do on this alert. Don't show it to me again until I reach the snooze date. And in this case, I put in 6 days, and that says because I'm January 23rd, it would say don't show me this one again until January 29th. Here we see an example of the auto forecast alert. This is where we are seeing that we've made an adjustment to our auto forecast because this item is selling faster than what we thought, and now what we may want to do is we may want to buy this item early, do something of this nature. And what I just did here was I drilled to that forecast screen. And this is that same item that we looked at earlier, where here our forecast was 28. We've actually sold 84, so the system has made an automatic adjustment for us for 56 units. And here on the alert screen, it's telling us exactly what it's doing. So this is a way of our seeing all of those items early so that we pull in that information early. And we can react to what's going on automatically real early in our processes. Now, we also have the production planning. And for those of you running manufacturing, this is the production plan area. And here, all of these items have been set as production items, meaning that I make these items, I have a production BOM, I have a routing that I run on it. And what we do is we look at the inventory that's on hand, we look at the planned, firm planned, and released orders, and then we create the simulated orders to go out as far as we've projected in the system so that we make sure that we have simulated orders out through the longest lead time of any one of our components. So what we can do here is, again, verify that we agree with the forecast of this item by clicking the View Forecast button. And here we see the forecast of the item, and we see what formula was chosen. Because once the forecast is chosen, then based upon setup, everything else becomes mathematical equations. So I've set the forecast up, the forecast is there. Then I set the parameters of how do I want to build simulated orders for this item, how do I want to make my production. Then once I know how I want to make my production and how I want to pull that data together, then I can create those production orders, and now I can see all of the components that I need. So this, again, is how we handle production and pull that information together. Now, we can do production in two different ways. One is by creating the simulated orders that we do right here. The other is we can actually take our forecast and push it over to manufacturing, so that if you actually need to run MPS because you're running routings with capacity restraints in your machine centers, you then need to run the MPS. Our creation of simulated orders here is using infinite capacity. But if you actually have capacity restraints, you would want to push our forecast over to MPS, run the master production schedule. Then, because you've then created all the production orders, we automatically see those, so then we'll do the purchasing and all of that information for you, just like normal. We have a client of ours over in Brussels, Belgium, that makes beer that has specific capacity restraints, so they're doing that exact process and bringing it in together. So this is the essence of the entire system. Just briefly, some other things that are here. We give you the forecast customers, which gives you the ability of doing collaborative forecasting. We give you the forecast vendors, which allow you to create a forecast to the vendor of these are my projected purchases based upon when I'm going to sell the item, and that forecast to the vendor only shows still what you need to purchase, so it takes into consideration already what you have in inventory and what you have on order. You also can look at the forecast summary, so you can see here what is my summary and look at all of that information on the summary. And this example right here shows you the company total, then the location total, and then it shows you the items. So you can look at the forecast summaries. Then finally, we also have the promotions. So we can come in here and look at our promotion forecast. All of these are different pieces that we pull together and bring the information together so that you can run advanced forecasting and procurement. And at this point, I had wanted to stop at about 45 minutes total so that we had time in our hour for questions. So Alan, have any questions come forward?
Yeah, great, Andrew. Thanks a lot. That is a whole lot of information to cover in 45 minutes, isn't it? If you'd like to, if you have audio ability, go ahead and raise your hand. I'd be more than happy to unmute you if you'd like to ask a question. We do have quite a few people on the call, so I'm not going to unmute everybody. Or if you don't want to raise your hand or you don't have audio ability, go ahead and type in a question, and Andrew will be happy to answer it. While we're waiting for questions to come in, I had one, Andrew. You're talking about the 5 alerts that come with the package. Do you see those alerts on the Roll Center?
Yes.
Okay, you do. I didn't know if they were.
It is directly here on the Roll Center in the alert stack.
Okay, great.
And you click the alert stack, and that will show you right there all of them. They can be filtered. So if you're running a multi-location environment, you could filter it by location. You can filter it by buyer or purchaser code. You can filter it by vendor. You can filter it by replenishment type. Okay, fantastic. I also noticed, and it's been a while since I sat through one of your presentations, when you were looking at the suggested orders, I really loved that where you could click and see how the, what I think was calculate lines, and you can see exactly how the package was computing that number. Is that a fairly new feature, Andrew? Or no, that's actually been in the system since day one. Okay, great. I just, it's really nice to be able to say, the computer's saying I should order 20. It's really nice to be able to click and see exactly what logic it's using to find a number. This is a good example one here of goes through the steps. Now, one thing that I didn't show in going through the steps is the economic order quantity. If you have multiple price breaks of that same item, we will test all the different price breaks of that item and come up with the best economic order quantity based upon the price break as well. Okay, fantastic. Well, I'm not seeing any questions coming in, and I'm not seeing any hands raised. So Andrew, thank you very much for your time today. If anybody, this is just an amazing amount of information to cover in a short time. So if any of you would like to have a follow-up conversation with myself and Andrew, so we can talk about how this process might be a little more applicable to your organization, please drop me a line, and I'd be more than happy to set up a second conversation. Andrew, you'd mentioned before the presentation that you were going to get on a plane today, so I hope your travels go well. And once again, 20 hours travel. 20 hours travel. So once again, thank you for your time today, and thank you all, and we'll talk to you next month. Take care.